Do you remember when the Bloodline was getting stale around 2022? It was just a bunch of interferences in Roman's matches, which became the norm for the next 2 years. A bunch of 30 to 40 minute segments of nothing of real importance, just nothing but a yap session about Roman's greatness. It was becoming a rinse and repeat cycle every time the Bloodline was in the city, and the fans were growing tired of it. Now add Sami Zayn to the mix, and the entire dynamic of the Bloodline switched as someone who wasn't family was making his way into the group. His reputation was taking major hits because of the meaningless and embarrassing feuds that he had to endure just to keep his job with WWE. He was losing a feud to the most non-intimidating celebrity ever. He was involved in boring rivalries with the likes of Baron Corbin and Shinsuke Nakamura. He just wasn't the same person who had all that star power back in NXT. Back in 2014, Sami Zayn was one of the hottest stars in the company, putting on all-time classic matches and rivalries with Shinsuke Nakamura, Adrian Neville, and Kevin Owens. Sami Zayn was the embodiment of fighting spirit. Even when he was the underdog, he always wanted to prove the doubters wrong and overcome the obstacles that were set in front of him. He was also always amazing on the mic, cutting passionate promos that shoot motivation and adrenaline into your veins. He was the perfect babyface that had that edge to him to take him seriously as a threat towards the title. He didn't let anyone just treat him like he was inferior, but also he never disrespected his opponents, even if he had all the reason to. When you look back at the rivalry between Owens and Sami in 2015, it was one of the best rivalries in WWE history because it felt like these two genuinely hated each other despite knowing that they were best friends in real life. Every encounter had you on the edge of your seat, waiting for these two to blow up against one another and tear the house down with an eventual match down the road. Sami Zayn had his perfect antagonist to his story, as Kevin Owens had this natural asshole look to him that made you believe his character was legit how he acted behind the scenes. Sami was that natural babyface that you just couldn't find yourself booing because he was so authentic and wholesome, but Owens brought out that fire that he could switch it up when needed. This was the person that the WWE Universe fell in love with. He is relatable to the crowd, he has a genuine soul, he has fantastic in-ring ability, and he's a great promo. He had the full package to become something big on the main roster if he was utilized right. That was the problem. He wasn't utilized right when he was finally called up. He had a great start in the main roster, debuting against one of the legends of the business in John Cena, but he dislocated his shoulder early in the match and hindered his ability to go all out. Sami Zayn went on to put impressive performance after impressive performance, but it just never led to true success, despite being one of the bright spots of the main roster television. He did relive his rivalry with Kevin Owens on the main roster, and it was one of the best things going on at the time. They were consistently having matches of the night because they had the best chemistry with one another and were putting everyone on the roster to shame. They never treated the rivalry as one of the biggest things on the show and were often just placed in the mid-card. And when you compare the career of the two, you see a large difference. Sami Zayn was able to connect with the crowd, and the pops that he was receiving would have fooled you thinking that he was one of the top stars of the company. But he was simply stuck in mid-card purgatory, not achieving any real success. Meanwhile, his best friend Kevin Owens leaped his career 10 times over, winning the United States Championship, the Intercontinental Championship, and even winning the Universal Championship. Clearly, the main roster has not treated Sami Zayn the best, so he tried out new things in his career. He tried out becoming a heel and teaming up with Kevin Owens, admitting that his career has been filled with non-stop mediocrity, while Owens went on to become one of the top stars with an impressive resume to back it up. This basically stripped away all the things that made Sami Zayn special. He now portrayed this character that would be synonymous with the person we became accustomed to for the next couple of years, just being a suck up and trying his best to get a win no matter what tactics he needed. This team with Kevin Owens is alright, but it was just executed in a very lackluster way. They went from fighting for the Intercontinental title to fighting Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan weekly. This was around the time that for some reason Shane McMahon had his nose in major programs for SmackDown, as if anyone wanted that. Anyways, they were rebels for a duration of their tag team, doing all they can to cause havoc and interrupt the flow of the show. At one point, they were even fired in kayfabe, but once again, they were feuding with Shane McMahon and Daniel Bryan. This whole thing was just a mess. Daniel Bryan was finally cleared to wrestle, but come on, who really cared about Bryan's first match being in a tag team against Owens and Zayn at the time? They had a match at WrestleMania, which wasn't really something to go home about, and then Sami and Owens ended up turning on each other not too long after this. Keep in mind that Sami Zayn has been on the roster for 2 years up to this point and hasn't won a single championship. He ended up getting traded to Raw, and that's when his career truly took a dip to the deepest of depths. He was an afterthought that was planted into championship matches, but everyone knew he was definitely not winning. It was a sad sight to witness, seeing how far Sami has come from his NXT days to how he was being misutilized on the main roster. Many talent that came up from NXT during the 2010s were clearly being mistreated, and Sami Zayn was a main example of that. Fast forward to 2020 and Sami Zayn is in the worst possible position of his career. He was the most irrelevant he has ever been and began to grow a sour spot in the hearts of many fans. He went from being the guy that everyone loved to the person that everyone wanted off of their TV. This character was so played out, and it was a far cry from what Sami Zayn was able to do. He went from main eventing takeovers with Kevin Owens to having a storyline in which he's trying to tell everyone that he's the real Intercontinental Champion. Many fans gave up on the idea of Sami Zayn ever bouncing back to his glory days and becoming a main eventer in the future, until 2022 happened. Sami Zayn was back in the spotlight as he was integrated into the Bloodline story. Sami Zayn had the personality to stand out and immediately took Paul Heyman's spot as the ultimate Roman Reigns glazer. Every single show, he tried his best to prove to the Bloodline that he can be a help for them and asked for them to be on his side when he was in danger as well. The genius behind Sami and the Bloodline was booked to perfection. He was a goofball in a sea full of wolves and gave a different layer to the family, immediately making them must-see TV again. He went from an experimental piece to an integral part of the story altogether, simply off of his charismatic ability to make the crowd react. Sami became the MVP of the group, constantly making everyone break character and having the crowd fall in love with him all over again. He had excellent backstage segments with the Bloodline, excellent in-ring segments with the Bloodline, excellent acting skills when things went wrong. This was the true resurgence of Sami Zayn's career. He was finally able to show WWE Creative how valuable he can be for the company when he was given that opportunity. From his performance in the Tribal Court segment, his Usi moment, his Royal Rumble moment, his Elimination Chamber moment, his Mania moment, he was a huge part of the Bloodline and reminded everyone exactly why at one point he was one of the most over guys in the company. Everyone was invested in his character and wanted him to overcome the bullies that were the Bloodline, and they cultivated an interest in his character that we haven't seen in a very long time. If you look at an entrance of Sami from 2021 and compare it to 2022, the difference is insane. You can honestly thank Sami Zayn for bringing back a lot of wrestling fans, because there was a point in time where we were embarrassed to tell our friends that we watched wrestling. Sami Zayn brought back our interest into the product and was a focal point of one of the loudest pops in WWE history when he turned on Roman Reigns. That is off the hard work and dedication that Sami had to make sure that this final opportunity to turn his career around was going to work. This easily transitioned Sami from an afterthought to one of the big time players in the company, and people began to appreciate him once again. He went on to have one of the biggest years of his career for the remainder of 2023, actually being treated as someone who could win big time matches. Obviously in the later part of the year, he went through a losing streak, but this is exactly how he gained the respect of the NXT universe behind him in the first place. He was becoming an underdog again, but the fans weren't losing interest because Sami wasn't just kicked to the side like he was before. They went with this route that they had to remember his roots and go back to the NXT days where he overcame anything that was thrown at him no matter how hard times got. Sami took that passion into his gauntlet match on an episode of Raw, defeating Chad Gable to gain the opportunity to face Gunther at WrestleMania for the Intercontinental Championship. This was the beginning of the mountain that Sami had to climb to finally win singles championship gold once again. His challenger was none other than the best Intercontinental Champion in WWE history, the Ring General Gunther. Gunther was on a historic run with the title, bringing back his prestige, and Sami was ready to tackle him, becoming the first to officially beat him for the championship. This was the ultimate David versus Goliath, and Sami was clearly not the favorite going into this match. I personally thought Gunther was taking his victory home with him, but it ended up being Sami taking the victory. This was the reward of Sami for being the MVP of the company for the last 2 years, and culminated in a great moment for him and the fans as he was finally able to get his breakout moment at the grandest stage of them all, WrestleMania. He was the new Intercontinental Champion, and this time he was able to have a reign that mattered, a reign that didn't embarrass his reputation. Ever since Mania, Sami Zayn has been in a feud with Chad Gable, and that has been one of the best stories in WWE so far. Sami Zayn is now in the position in which he's telling the Alpha Academy that they are being mistreated, the same way that Kevin Owens was telling Sami about how the Bloodline was mistreating him. It shows the progression in Sami's character, and these segments have been golden so far. He went from the afterthought in the mid-card division to a main player for the company. Sami is for the people. He tells compelling stories on the mic. He's a fantastic wrestler. He has all the tools to become a world champion one day. This is why everyone loves Sami Zayn.